Let's go.
Okay, now we're going to demonstrate what's called an understitch on the lapel of a jacket. And there are three places. There is the undercollar area in the top of the collar. And then you have the upper lapel, which is, the upper lapel. And then you have the inside parts where the closure is, the button and buttonholes. This, of course, repeats itself on both sides. Now, the reason for this understitching is the way it's going to fall, the way the jacket fits. The understitching prevents the roll line from creeping out from underneath. So in these areas, things wouldn't start coming out. It keeps the seams kind of controlled in place, and it gives you a perfect edge of the roll. So when you have your lapels finished, it just lays down perfectly. It's a reinforcement so that these underseams cannot start peeking out. Anyway, I'm going to show this process on a jacket in process. So here you have your inner seams, and we finished that a little bit earlier. You have to trim all these seams here. That's why we didn't sew them down, so we could trim them real nice and grade them. And then at some later point, we're going to press them. Then here is the dividing line between the upper lapel and the lower closure. This is your hem finish where you clipped in here, and then you trimmed it from that 1/2 inch into 1/4. So these are all the preparations. You're going to grate your seams. The corners of the lapels, the sewing line should be around the corners. It should be number 1 stitch. And then in here, we trim these corners back. Makes it so when you turn the corners, they turn out to be really, they have to be totally flat. See, there cannot be any pulling. And because you didn't sew down your seam allowances, the seam allowances are all free, and therefore when you turn it, you have no problem. Victor, you cannot sew right now. Not when I'm talking. Thank you. Okay, so let's just stop with this before we do the understitching. We'll spend a little time grading these seams. And grading always means this is just trimming. But as soon as you add another layer, you're spreading it, then it's graded. And you have to clip where the 1/2 inch, where your hem meets the facing. Okay, now, remember we said that the understitching, you can just kind of easily turn this. Now, probably going to be handling it. You see, right now we got a whole lot of jacket in our hands. See, I'm just kind of pushing this and turning it by hand. No pointer at this point. Just trying to get an idea of the corners. See, you can take your fingernail and just kind of poke in here. Good choice of words. You want to kind of have before you start putting all these seams into place, you want to have an idea that they match. because otherwise, you know, if your understitch doesn't come out right and you have to, later you have to open up way too much, right? So kind of hold it like this, give yourself a quick look. See, that looks good. My corners are nice, see, very good. Now, you take your jacket at this point, you can do a little finger pressing if you want, but this is the upper color and this is the under color. And the under color is where you're going to put your understitch. Now you kind of have to open this a little bit so you can get in here. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to open this up, and you can also see from the inside where the undercolor is, because the undercolor is cut on a bias. Now we only go in as far as our foot on the machine is going to allow us. It doesn't have to be all the way into the corner. Just an area big enough to prevent, you know, to give the roll a nice place. So just fold this whole seam allowance towards the undercolor, and then you can feel it underneath where it is with your fingers, and you can give yourself a couple pins just so you know where it is. But even as we're not going to press anything, we're just going to pull it open as we sew. But I'm just kind of giving myself a couple pins here to make sure my seam allowance stays in the right direction. Because if you flip under there, then you're in trouble. It won't lay down right. So it doesn't even have, you know, just enough to give some pins here. Now I'm just going to show you on this tape here just the undercolor and one lapel, and then the second one, the other side is, you can, you know, it's just repeating the first one. So this goes this way. Now in the front part, remember the dividing line is where the notch is from the lapel. You know, between the lower and the upper, this little clip. So you got to make sure that this actually clips right up to the seam. So when you flip them, that there is no pull. So right now, if you cannot really see that from the outside, so what I do is I'm just going to put a pin here, and I'm going to move this to the right side, and, you know, see where my pin is, and then I'm going to put a pin right here and take this one back out, so I have an idea how far to go. Now the upper lapel, if you have any doubts, you just remember how it lays down. So you know that this color is going to lay down this way. So this lapel is going to roll this way. So we're looking at the underside. So you go in here, and again you find your seam allowance, and you push it towards the garment part, actually. So we put a pin here, and just a couple, because most of the work is done under the machine. Now understitching is how do you remember how much? How far do you go in?
As far as you can?
No. It's usually standard is 1/16 of an inch. But like if you do a heavy coat with some heavier fabric than what I have here, then you can go up to 1/8, okay? But usually it's not more than 1/8. But a lot of it depends on the weight of the fabric. But in most cases, like most standard jackets and stuff, it's 1/16 of an inch. an understitch. Okay, and then on the bottom side, you go the other way, you know, you go to the inner part. So right here where I'm dividing, I'm gonna, underneath, you know, I take my seam allowance and I push it this way. And because you clipped in the middle, it won't interfere with anything. All right, so in a lot of times, once you understand how the system works, you really don't, you know, need that many pins or anything because you know what you're looking for, and you can do a lot of it just by sewing it. But you gotta have your hands underneath in order, and we, just like in here, we only go as far as the machine is going to allow us. Okay, let's go to the machine. You want to stop and go, or?